Hello everyone, welcome to this internally screening review of Leprechaun 4 in Space. Now you may be wondering why on earth, of all the Leprechaun films, or of all films in general, we might have decided to pick this one. Well, for the Hooptober that we're currently doing, this one was pick or find the worst horror sequel from the 90s that you could get your hands on. And this was apparently it. I mean, if you don't know much about Leprechaun, it is a sort of cult horror series with Warwick Davis, the legend himself, in the titular role as the Leprechaun. And it appears that each film kind of sees him going through various different scenarios and hijinks as a mischievous leprechaun, just fucking about with people and getting up to all sorts of goofy stuff. His magical powers seem to know limitless bounds, and he's basically an omnipotent force akin to a god. And so they just decided, why not put him in space? Yep. Why not make a goofy kind of colonial marines-esque leprechaun film?
Why not?
Why the hell not? Who else stars in this film? I don't know. No, you probably will never have seen them. I mean, in terms of production quality and levels, this was more similar to an episode of Red Dwarf than any actual film that you would have seen. It's very, very low budget, but weirdly, gleefully fun. So, Rupert, what did you make of Leprechaun 4 in space?
Well, I mean, I was absolutely sold on it, having read the title and knowing nothing else. I think I have seen Leprechaun 1, but I can't remember it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the only other entry in the Leprechaun canon that I've experienced.
Yes.
But to be honest, once you get past the fact that this film is, you know, essentially not very well made in terms of production quality,
yep, and
some of the acting is, you know, very campy and crap. Once you get past that, I honestly don't think this is a bad film. I genuinely...
Well, like not even bad?
No, I don't think it's bad. I actually think it's quite a good comedy film.
Yeah?
Straight up. Yeah, like you said, like it's basically a really silly spin on, and a little bit longer, but basically a silly Doctor Who / Red Dwarf spoof. And that's basically what it is. But what I think is quite impressive about it is, one, it's actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
And not even just like unintentionally. There are actually some like funny moments in it that are clearly for gags.
Oh, I mean, most of the film is trying to do that.
It's but it's self-aware in a way that isn't annoying as well. Maybe there are moments here and there.
I could see people finding it annoying.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just saying,
it has its appeal.
I personally, and I can be quite annoyed by incredibly self-aware stuff. It's something I often criticise, like a lot of the Disney stuff for doing, like a lot of the meta humour.
Okay.
But I don't think this film ever makes that style of humour annoying in the way it executes it.
Fair enough.
And it also, I just think, if you look at it structurally, I think it is quite a sort of well-paced film, and it does a pretty good job of not taking the characterization super seriously, but managing to characterize each of the cast in a way that you sort of know what their thing is. Because it's all very surface level, right? I'm not saying like, oh, this character is really well written. What I'm saying is, like, in the context of this film, you're not here for the characters. You're here for silly, goofy effects. Warwick Davis saying funny things. So all you really need from the actors is for them to be, you know, aware of what they're acting in and playing to the strength of the film, and have a character. And I think pretty much all the characters have a character. And I think what often happens with horror films like this is, when it's being a little bit self-aware and it's trying to characterise the ensemble cast, every character will be really annoying. Like, I don't know, a lot of like Eli Roth films where you have like a group of teenagers going somewhere and getting murdered. The whole theme seems to be like, oh, the characterisation isn't important, so everyone is like a sweary, quipping arsehole.
Right, and, that's, like, they're all kind of the same character as well.
Whereas here, like, you've got Warwick Davis, who's just sort of an agent of chaos, which is great. You've got the handsome soldier man.
Classic.
You have the sort of put upon black soldier who's just kind of like, you know, one of the lads.
Right, yeah.
You've got the sexy woman. Who's also the competent woman. You have the smart woman who is a doctor or something.
Right.
You have the really strict sergeant chief. You have the perverted scientist.
Yes.
And you have the sort of deformed main villain who isn't the leprechaun, right?
Right, yeah.
And the fact that I can remember all of that speaks to the fact that I think the film actually does a pretty good job in terms of...
That's fair, actually. Yeah, because I mean, like you say, this kind of film is kind of designed to be more caricaturish in its character creation than a serious horror.
It's parodying sci-fi, so therefore, like you're
getting
characters
tropes as characters.
Yes, exactly.
But it does a good job in actually giving characters tropes. Where, like you say, some horror films will just give everyone the same shtick, and it's completely forgettable, completely frustrating. Yeah. No, I agree with you. When it comes to the humor, it does kind of. In my mind, the humour of the film is largely, particularly when it comes to Warwick Davis, it's like so cringe that it turns back around on itself and becomes funny. Like they're trying so hard for this character to say goofy shit all the time, and it's like so wince-inducing. But it's still kind of, you get to a point where you do start finding it charming. Like to begin with, I was like, oh,
it's a very jarring experience, isn't
like the first sort of 10-15 minutes, I was like, Jesus Christ, what have we gotten ourselves into? But you do kind of warm into it a bit. I will say that. I found the Leprechaun being more and more charming as the film goes on.
Yeah, I think the Leprechaun himself he's kind of the appeal of the film, but at the same time, and he's kind of the centre of the film, but at the same time, I think what they managed to do well is he's not like the only enjoyable part. Like there were certain character interactions that I thought were kind of amusing, like the perverted scientist and the sort of
the evil doctor.
The evil doctor. That was kind of amusing.
Yeah, where he's like a sycophant sucking up to him. Yeah, and then he hates him.
And like the doctor is like just so obviously scheming the whole time to screw them over. And like the dickhead like sergeant with the metal brain or whatever. And you've got like him being rude to the smart girl, because of course he is.
Right.
And he's like, what are you doing on my squad? Not in my day. Like, it does a good job. And then also just once Warwick Davis, the Leprechaun, is on the ship, it's just quite satisfying watching him sort of wreak havoc. And to be clear, I'm not saying this film is a masterpiece. There are definitely problems with it. Like, it's not a great film, but I genuinely don't think it's a bad film.
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I do completely concede to you that there is so much gleeful fun with this, and there is such like a kind of a knowing nod and wink to the audience that they do find that balance with. It's not completely obnoxious and like, haha, aren't we so funny?
Yeah.
I kind of like there's a level of awkwardness to it. There's one thing where they try and establish the sort of stereotypical budding romance between handsome soldier and handsome science lady. And they're so awkward at sweet talking one another. Like, they just like keep fumbling the bag every time.
It's great,
It's so bad. But like the dialogue is so... There's like an awkwardness that you almost feel a better film would have put intentionally there in some of like the awkwardly long cuts and like sort of staying on people for a bit too long. But intentional or not, it does kind of do this really interesting dynamic between them that's slightly different to a normal dynamic because of that level of incompetence.
There are also like some jokes here that are actually just funny. I mean, you can go on like the Warwick Davis monologues are just kind of innately hilarious. But there's like visual humour that's quite clever, like when the evil bad guy who runs the ship appears behind someone, but he's just a TV screen on wheels, so he just kind of like moves into frame awkwardly behind the perverted scientist as he's like touching up a body.
He's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's like, hello, doctor, or whatever. And it's like, that's actually quite funny. And like, I also thought that the bad effects, like, it's a real mixed bag. So like, Warwick Davis has like drawn on spiky teeth, which is just like so obvious.
They just put black lines in between his teeth.
It's so obvious that it's like almost bold, and like, the sets almost look like they're gonna fall apart because they're clearly made of like cardboard. But like, there are some other effects where it's like they clearly put quite a lot of effort into it, like where I thought the main bad guy's sort of like
he's like where he looks like Davros.
He's basically Davros. That was quite impressive. And then whatever, I guess spoilers for Leprechaun 4. Sorry, lads. The bit where he turns into a giant spider, which I was not expecting at all, because of why the fuck not, which is brilliant, by the way. Just turn him into a spider. There's this like horrifying animatronic Cronenberg-esque
it's
thing.
Very like The Fly.
It actually looks pretty good.
So
like, I wonder if they were like, we're gonna turn you into a giant spider at the end of the film, right? How much special effects money do we have left over? Right, 50p. Right, okay. We're just gonna get everything else from Poundland.
Right. Yeah.
Which I kind of respect that.
I do. I agree with you in that. I kind of like some of the set pieces as well. Like there's I think it's really funny when the Leprechaun leprechaun becomes giant out of nowhere because they've got this technology that shrinks down all the treasure they find so that they can transport it easily, and they accidentally reverse it so that he becomes a giant and he's like stomping around like super goofy. That's great.
That's just a funny that's a funny gag.
There's some like so like ridiculous humour where I forgot the chest burster scene, but he comes out of a man's penis.
I mean, like those are the kind of gags where it's like that's what this film is for. Like, we should make fun of Alien, but instead of an alien, it's Warwick Davis, and instead of his chest, it's his cock. Like that's just genius.
I mean, if you try to unpick the storyline of this film, that's like where things just stop making any sense, because particularly the beginning of the film is so jarring. Because we haven't seen Leprechauns 2 or 3, so we were like, does it lead in any way?
And from what I've read, it doesn't seem to have. It's a bit of a just sort of
bang, here you are. So that makes things even more confusing because it feels like it is following on from something else. It feels like you've got a bunch of people on a spaceship, they've got a mission, and they're like talking as though they know where they're going.
Take out this goddamn alien.
And there's no like, like in Alien, you've got like a really slow build into that, and you would kind of understand that all the characters don't really know where, like they're all kind of disoriented and they need that time to, get accustomed to what's going on. In this film, they just sort of sat around going, what do we need? Let's go, this fucking bastard, as though it's something being referenced to from something else. And then Warwick Davis is just down in like on like a planet in a cave with
and he's
like a beautiful
princess.
Scantily clad princess with glitter all over herself and trying to become the king of some unknown.
He wants to become the king. That's
the king of whatever planet.
Because he has the theme of the film is that the leprechaun has a big chip on his shoulder, presumably because he's tiny, right?
Right, maybe.
And I actually think it's quite clever thematically how that works into the main scheme of the bad guy on the ship, because they're obviously opposed to one another because they both want the same thing. I forget what it is that they're after.
He wants to repair himself with the blood of the princess, because the princess has some kind of magical self-repairing blood.
Well, I think that's quite clever in a way, because thematically, so the leprechaun is like small and sort of hideous, right? And that's why he has a chip on his shoulder. Right. He's like, I love my gold. I think I'm better than everyone, even though I'm a leprechaun. Right. And the bad guy is sort of similar, where he's like, I'm a fucking evil genius and everyone should respect me.
But I've lost so many of my organs. I'm deformed.
But I'm like hideous and I'm deformed. And he wants to, repair himself. And then the film has a sort of tragic irony to it, where he becomes a spider and the leprechaun becomes giant.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess like if we're going to talk about the drawbacks of the film, I think it's all like pretty obvious stuff. Like it's ugly. It sounds bad. Like the acting is like
questionable at best.
Some of it's okay, some of it's like
they do know where they are, which kind of lends itself to the charm. But
it's poor quality acting, ultimately. And all of the sort of many drawbacks that would stop me from saying like this is a good film. Yeah. But I can't say it's a bad film in my mind, because I think that this film seems very aware of its own limitations and is pretty well paced and pretty entertaining. Yeah. Based on what they have, and I probably would watch this again.
100%. I could see us in a few years doing a reaction to this, to like kind of bring a few friends in and be like, expose yourself to.
Or just like beers with some friends. Does anybody want to watch Leprechaun 4 in space? 100%.
Yeah.
No one's going to say no.
No, exactly. Given our cosign, they would obviously watch it because we have impeccable taste. So, okay, based on that, what do you reckon you'd give it?
I'll give it a 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10?
Yep.
That's kind of bold.
It's just, you have to take each film for what it is, and I think ultimately for what this film is trying to do, and with the limitations the film clearly had, I think it does a pretty good job of what it's trying to do. In fact, in terms of achieving what it's trying to do, I think it really does a good job. In terms of like, is it as good as a lot of other horror comedies? Obviously, it falls short, right? Because there's no craft to it, really. Okay. So, like, say compare it to something like Evil Dead 2, which is like probably the best horror comedy, right?
100%.
But that in terms of like plot is actually about the same.
Yeah, because there's really no plot in
it's about where Leprechaun 4 is. Yeah. But it's all about the craft and, the acting and
it's so
all
much
the other
better
elements
assembled.
That goes to making a film. But do you see my logic in getting to 5 out of 10?
I do. I actually do. And, I'm not going to lie, I also enjoyed it a lot. I just don't know. There's something holding me back from going, this film is average or like not bad.
Yeah.
I think I would be more conservative and give it a 4 out of 10, but I kind of echo a lot of what you have said. It's more just a matter of like a kind of personal feeling within myself of just like, there's too much kind of wrong with it to really kind of allow myself to see it in that light. But again, like you said, I'm happily...
So what you're saying is Leprechaun 4 in Space is a misunderstood masterpiece.
In its own way. Now, here's the thing. This is a strange thing with kind of trying to put a number to a film, is that films can achieve like great things by their own merits.
Well, yeah,
by
all films are aiming for something different.
Exactly. Right? And so if you kind of look at this, you know, in the grand scheme of films and comedies and horror, like a 4 out of 10 makes sense, because it's like, you know, there's a lot of things they get right and a lot of things they get completely wrong. But if you looked at it as, oh, this is a schlocky, barely even B movie, like D movie.
A straight to DVD film.
Oh, 100%. And in terms of what it achieves with such a limited amount of, clearly it's got a minuscule budget. It should be awful by pure concept. But they make something so fun out of it. By those metrics, it's way better than anything else, than a lot of the sort of films you would get for this money, of this technical ability.
There are a lot of horror films that are sort of trying to be bad, right? It's quite a common thing.
Yeah, true.
I can't think of like an example off the top of my head, but I've seen plenty of horror films where it's like trying to do the, oh well, it's schlocky fun as an excuse for bad filmmaking, but they fall short of that. Whereas I don't think this film, it really doesn't fall short of that. It kind of, it is exactly where it needs to be.
Right.
So, for example, I think an example of some kind of meta horror films, I think the Scream sequels. Now, a lot of people are really into those. I think they're all really bad from the ones I've seen, and they're very meta. And I think they're really boring. They're not scary at all, and they don't really have much going for them in terms of craft. Ironically, I think Leprechaun 4 has a lot more going for it in terms of craft. If by virtue of just what they do with some of the effects, because they really do try with stuff like the forced perspective of, you know, Warwick Davis being giant out of nowhere, people getting splattered.
The spider costume and the spider is so like,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
I think the gold standard is something like Dale and Tucker versus Evil.
Oh,
which is like, that is the perfect meta horror comedy. Or like Cabin in the Woods or something.
Right, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen the Scream sequels, but one thing that comes to mind is something like The Dead Don't Die, the Jim Jarmusch film. Because that film, I mean, is one of the most singularly meta things I've ever seen, but it's also desperately irritating in it. There's a fair amount of craft to it, so I can't hate it too much in terms of its technical abilities and the technical display. But in terms of the script and the story and how it's all orchestrated, it's so obnoxious and beating you around the head with all of its meta ideas.
Well, which one would you sooner rewatch?
Oh, 100% this. Like, I will happily go to my grave never watching The Dead Don't Die ever again. I think the key difference is charm.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a hard thing to quantify, really. You can't really put your finger on, this is the reason this film is charming and this is the reason this film isn't. But I guess there's a kind of, perhaps an earnestness to this, where it's really trying to kind of make something out of nothing.
And a level of just sort of like, this is a weird term, but like sort of like an understanding of economy of what you're trying to get to, right? Because you have like, this film is very structurally crushed and like very tight. Like,
it's
always
just
like,
bang,
and here's
bang,
the next bit, here's the next bit, here's the next bit. But it's actually quite well structured in that you get the sort of the intro, you get the scary section, you have the characters at their sort of desperate moment, and then they bounce back, and then you have the big thing at the end, right? And it hits those beats, which are all sort of very structured and, you know, predictable maybe, but it hits them, and as a viewer, it's effective because I would never felt bored or distracted while watching this film, particularly because it is just effective.
Yes,
even if it's not exceptional. Which goes without saying.
Yeah. I think that's fair. So I mean, at the end of that, I think weirdly you wouldn't have expected it, but we probably would recommend Leprechaun 4. Now, it's not very well received, as we've said at the beginning. It's one of the lowest rated of the sort of horror sequels of the 90s. But I think what we seem to have come to the conclusion of is that it's been given a bit of a bad rap. If you go into this film knowing what to expect and kind of understanding this is very low budget B movie schlock, I think there's a lot of charm that it has that perhaps many films of its equivalents don't. But we can completely concede if you watch this film and you absolutely hate it, I guess there's no bad blood.
You're not really too far wrong.
No, because, you know, I guess to a level it is all about taste. It's whether you find this kind of stuff funny or not. Like, the humor in these things is so subjective. Humor and horror are so, like, if you don't find something scary, loads of people say it's a shit horror film. If you don't find something funny, it's a shit comedy film. But some people might have the complete opposite taste to you and think it's the best thing they've ever seen. Sure. So with that all said, thank you very much for watching this internally screening review of Leprechaun 4 in space. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, please like and subscribe for more horror content. Hooptober will be continuing to the end of the month, and we'll be banging out reviews as much as we can. And after that, there will be plenty of reactions, other stuff that we've got cooking up. If you dislike this video, and we will catch you again in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.
Peace.